Thank you. My name is Marites Macapagal, and I am from the People's Department ODD and Computer Training team. And today we're going to have Excel Pivot Table Part 1. Part 2 is coming up next week. So if you would like to continue learning this pivot table, please continue to register for the next session by next week. Let me go over our learning objective for this afternoon. So, for this afternoon, participants will be able to prepare data for analysis. Then we're going to create a pivot table from a local data source. We will also create a table from a multiple sources, and of course, coming from an external source, specifically from Access database. Okay, so what is really a pivot table? Okay. A pivot table is an interactive way to quickly summarize large amount of data. You could use a pivot table to analyze numerical data in detail. It can group items into categories. It could count number of items in each category and can sum the items value. Pivot charts complement pivot tables by adding visualization to the summary data in pivot table. It will allow you to easily see comparison, patterns, and trend. Both pivot table and pivot charts enable you to make informed decisions about critical data in your enterprise or department. Okay, now I am not going to cover pivot chart in today's lesson. But on part 2, I will be able to cover and demonstrate how to use or create a pivot chart. Now, a pivot table is specifically designed for querying large amount of data in many user-friendly ways. It is also designed to subtotal and aggregate the numeric data, summarizing data by categories and subcategories, and creating custom calculations and formulas. It also could design for to expand and collapse levels of data to focus your results and drilling down details from summary data for areas of interest to you. So later on, I'm going to show you how to be able to do that and also how to manipulate or edit an existing or created pivot table. It is also designed to filter, to sort, and group and conditionally format the most useful and interesting subset, okay, on your information. And finally, it is designed for presenting concise, attractive, and annotated online or printed reports. Now, before creating a pivot table, there are some guidelines to prepare data. And first, your data shouldn't have any empty rows or column. This is very, very important to have accuracy in your report. Second, it must have only a single row heading. Third, there is no filter applied. Fourth, there are no subtotals. Fifth, there are no duplicate data entries. And sixth, data are formatted based on data type. So these are some of the guidelines to prepare a data. I am going to demonstrate on how to be able to prepare a data using um, an Excel file that we have. So allow me to minimize this, okay, and share with you an existing data. This is an old report that was extracted from PeopleSoft. Don't worry, this data have actually been randomized. So it's not an accurate one, but more or less just to give you an idea. A lot of times we actually extract data from PeopleSoft. And this is the way the data are actually downloaded in Excel, right? You normally have an enormous amount of rows of information on top. Now, so what do we do? Notice, but before anything else, notice that you have here from row 1 down to row 15 are actually headings or titles or some informations that we don't really need for the report. Now, allow me to scroll down to the bottom. Okay, and take a look at the bottom. There are this one. I have 3 rows of informations, which are actually like grand totals for this information. Let me again move up to the top. So these are some of the information we don't need. Remember, one of the rule is it must only have a single row heading. So the row heading we are looking into here is what we have in row 16. So anything above row 16 are unnecessary data. So to be able to clean, allow me to select row 1 up to row number 15 and simply get rid of it by deleting these rows. Okay, so I'm just going to delete those unnecessary rows. Okay, so now I am following the first guideline. It must have only a single row heading. And that's what we have right now in row 1. So let me go to the end, and I am going to select the last 3 rows, which I don't need for my report. Once again, allow me to delete those rows, okay? And allow me to go back to the top of my report. Secondly, so we have to make sure that there are no empty rows or column. How do we check for empty rows and column? So again, just make sure you click anywhere within your list. Okay. And in your list, in your home ribbon, under your editing group, see here, there is an option under find and select. If you click on the drop down arrow, there is an option called Go to Special. Click on Go to Special. In the Go to Special dialog box, simply select blanks. Okay, this will allow you to select cells that are blanks. And when I simply click on OK, give it a few seconds, and Excel will now start. There you go. It selected the first blank right there and all the other blanks. Can you see it? Okay, right now it is in N and 695. Okay, and there are other blanks following it. So what is recommended when you have blanks like this? Replace it with a 0 or an NA. So right now I'm going to replace it with NA, so not to make it blank. So I would simply type N/A. Now, instead of hitting enter key to populate the rest of the blank cell, simply press Control and enter. And notice the other blanks are now populated with NA. Okay, so that's the first step. So now we were able to also follow the other rulings, right? That there should be no empty rows or columns or cells, right? So next, there is, if you look, move up again to the top, we don't have any filtering applied. There are no subtotals so far. So far, I don't have any duplicates in this. And if you look at your data, okay, these datas are actually formatted based on the data type. Employee IDs are text. Let me randomly do it. Dates are dates. Numbers are numbers. Okay, so far we are good and ready to now create a pivot table. So what are the steps in creating a pivot table? So the first step in creating a pivot table is simply select the cell you want to create a pivot table from. So right now, I am just clicking anywhere within the table that I have. Now, we will go to insert, and under the insert ribbon, if you look at the tables group, there's what you call pivot table. Okay, so I would simply click on pivot table. By the way, there's a recommended pivot table. I am quickly going to demonstrate to you how to use the recommended pivot table after showing you how to create a pivot table from scratch. So allow me to select pivot table. There you go. Now, you notice I have now a pivot table from a table arranged, and because I am within, the listing that I'm going to use for my pivot table, it automatically selected the range. And this is primarily the reason why there should be no blank rows, because if there are any blank rows in your thousands of rows, it will stop when it sees a blank row. So because there is no blank row, it selected the entire table or listing, and you could see it right there on my table list. Next, choose where you want your pivot table to be placed. Obviously, I do not want to put it in the same worksheet. So it's going to give me by the default a new worksheet. And that's where the radio button is currently on. So all you have to do right now is simply click on OK. Now, we have started creating the pivot table. Now, let us now and allow me to show you the steps in building out our pivot table. Now, to add a field to your pivot table, what we need to do is to select the field name checkbox in the pivot table field. Let's take a look in here. I have a pivot table field listing. Now, there are a few parts I would like you to be familiar with at this point. Okay, so if you notice, take a look at my list. This is my pivot table right here. It's an empty one, but these are my field listing. If you look at on the pivot table field task pane, this is the task pane I'm talking about. There is one icon right here. Okay, and this is what you call the tools. If you click on the drop down arrow, by default, this layout normally uses this layout. Okay, the pivot table field listing uses this layout. And you notice with this layout, I have to constantly scroll to be able to see all the fields. And that's the reason why you notice that on my layout, I uses the field and my area section side by side. So I could see all of this, the list of fields, and also the location where I could actually put my data or fields, right? So you will also see that the field list has a field section in which you could pick the fields you want to show. And those are actually represented by the boxes right there. And in here, I have what you call the filters. Filter area fields shows the top level of report as you would filter the criteria in your pivot table. I have a section for rows, and I have section for columns, and I have section for values. Now, selected fields are added to their default areas, and these are the default areas. Not normally, usually, non-numeric fields are added to the row. Date and time hierarchies are added to the column, and numeric fields are added to the values. If I simply put a check mark on the fields that I have here, Excel will automatically decide for me the best position or location, okay, or field area that they would recommend it will actually sit on or reside. However, if you would like to decide for yourself where you would like to position each field, you simply use your left mouse and drag them to the corresponding field section. So to start with, what we're going to do is we're going to structure the pivot table to answer a question. How many employees from each business unit have completed the mandated training? Remember, this is a mandated training reports, okay? So you would like to find out how many employees from each business unit have completed the mandated training. So we would like to get the count of the employees. And how are we going to get the count of employees using the employee ID? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag. You notice how my mouse now says employee ID. Click and hold my left mouse and drag it all the way down to the values. Okay. By doing so, this will answer the question, how many parts of the question, which is the pivot table will show the sum. You notice it gave me the sum. Oops, it gave me the count of the employee ID number, right? So this gave me the count. And now the count is, okay, 13,000. Okay, let me see. Let me make sure it is really the count. Or, okay, there you go. So that's the count. You see, count of employee ID. Okay, I have 13,483. Simply click OK, and that gives me the count. Now, we need to be able to find out how many employees from each business unit. So therefore, the pay business unit, which is the category that we wanted to break this number into, will now reside in the row area. And these are the different business unit, and these are basically the numbers broken down. Okay, so this answers each of the business unit part of the question. Okay, so each row in the pivot table will summarize the count per business unit. There you go, the count per business unit. Okay, now you could even add an additional information. What if you wanted to add the department under the business unit? So if I have the department right here and put it under the pay business unit, these are the different departments to break it down clearly and more details. Okay, so now you could see that the 81 is made up of these numbers per department. And if you would like to know clearly who among the employees, I could use the name, or I could even use the employee ID number. Okay. If I decide to use the name, I could also put the name underneath this one, and that will give you that name. Now, you notice the minus sign right there. The minus will allow you to be able to collapse. See that? You could also go to the pivot table, analyze right there, and there's the expand field, collapse fields. If I click on the collapse field, it will collapse everything. And if I click on the expand field here, it will expand everything. But literally, you could also do it by certain groups or departments. So again, allow me to just simply collapse it. So that's an easy way of creating a pivot table. We have successfully created one. Now, we could add additional information. What if I would like to find out the status? Are the people on the list, what is their status or the employment status? So what we could actually do is we could add the employee status, right, in my column, so that it will break it down to the active, those who are in leave with pay, not applicable. Remember, some of the options that I have are not applicable. Retired, suspended, terminated, and that gives you the total. There you go. So, like, look at this. Capco have one retired and one terminated. So 93 are active, one retired, one terminated, gives you a total of 95. Very clear, right? Now, there is another way of viewing it also. Take a look. Okay. If I move, right, and use the employee status as a filtering field, so allow me to drag employee status to filters. Now take a look at my pivot table. I have here my filters. There you go, employee status, all. If I click on the drop down arrow, these are my status, employment status. I could click on select all multiple items, and there you go. And I could remove the all, and I could filter by selecting the criteria I would like to view. So I would like to know how many are really active. So there you go. I have active. Okay, let's take a look. Remember, do you remember what is my total? 13,483. So by just selecting the active ones, if I click OK, and my grand total at the end, let me just take a look at the end for my grand total, will be 13,421. So my grand total previously was 13,483. Okay, so then therefore about 60,000 have been retired or have other status currently. Now, how do I remove fields? Okay, so what I showed you is how to change the layout of the report. Let me also show you how to remove fields if you change your mind and you would like to. Remember, we said PivotTable is an interactive tool. So we could actually change the layout, right? So watch me. How do I remove fields? There are multiple ways of removing fields. One, if I would like to remove name, one way is I could simply click on this and say remove fields. And I was able to remove name. It's no longer there. Another way of doing is simply removing the department, click and hold on it, and drag it back to the original list. Now it's gone. So all I have right now is the pay business unit and the count of the employee number. Now let me rearrange it. What if I move my business unit to my column? There you go. And my employee status, I am going to put it in the row. There you go. And of course, with this, I am going to remove the filter, clear filter, and this is now my status. And the value is still. So the layout looks a lot different. But again, I am using the same information, same fields. I was using employee status, pay business unit, and the count employee ID only in a different layout. And that makes this pivot table an interactive pivot table. Okay, so I'm, I hope it is very clear. Now, allow me now to go to the second option, which is to create a pivot table from multiple local data source. So let me just save this and call it, okay, my exercise for pivot table completed. Okay, and I would simply minimize this, and I would like to open another table, okay, and it's now called multiple table. So what I'm going to demonstrate to you now is how to create a pivot table from multiple local data source. Now that you have seen how to create pivot table from a single table, which is very simple and straightforward, what do we do if I have multiple table in my workbook? Okay, this is now when we could actually use the Excel 2016 um, feature called the data model. It was introduced when Office 2016 was introduced. The data model is used to combine or join in data from multiple tables. This enables you to build a relational data source in a workbook, just like how you do it in Access. So some of you who are very familiar in Access, you know that when you have multiple tables, you're able to join those data by building a relationship among those fields in your table. You could also do the same in Excel. So in Excel, you could add data to the data model when you insert a pivot table. So what is really a data model? Um, Let me share with you a description from Microsoft. Okay. A data models allows you to integrate data from multiple tables, effectively building a relational data source inside an Excel workbook. And within Excel, data models are used transparently, providing a tabular data used in pivot tables and pivot chart. So a data model is visualized as a collection of tables in a filled list, and most of the time you'll never see, even though it is actually there. So let me now demonstrate to you and easier to understand once I show you how it really works. So right now I have this workbook called multiple tables. Let me first save it and call it my multiple tables. Okay, so just in case something goes wrong with my file, I still have the original intact. Okay, now take a look. Down at the bottom, I have three worksheets in this workbook: names, attendance, and classes. Correct? Now, currently, these are just listings or database that we have in Excel. Okay, and in my name box, I don't have any tables. Now, some of you who have been in my Excel basic class, I have shown and demonstrated to you how to name table from a data, right? So we could create and convert this list of data into a table. So how do we do that? Okay, do anybody remember how to create a table? So, okay. So anyway, let me and allow me to demonstrate to you the different ways of converting a list into a table so that we don't have to select the, just like in this case, if I'm going to use this entire data, I have to know what is the beginning row and I have to know what is my ending row. So in this case, my ending is F 2,647, right? So that's the entire range, A1 to F 2,647. So that's hard to remember. And by the time I'm able to select the one at the bottom, I might have deselected the one on top. So to easily select the big amount of information, it is good to convert our list into a table. To do so, the first step and the easiest way to do it is simply click anywhere within your list. And let's go to insert. Under the tables, there is what you call tables. Simply click on the tables. And now you have the create table dialog box. And notice how it selected A1 to F 2,647, which is exactly the last row we were looking at. And my table has header, and that's my header. All I have to do is simply click OK, and this list has been converted into a table. Take a look. We now have a table design, which means this has been converted into a table. And in the table name, it is called by default Table 1. Let's rename it and call it names so that it would be identified clearly, names. Hit the enter key. Click away. So if I would like to check, if I click on my name box, I see names. I click on names. You see how it selected that range. Perfect. Now let's go to attendance. Another way of converting this list into a table is simply using the keyboard combination Control and the letter T. So I would simply say Control T. And notice where's the data from your table? This is the data. My table has header. All I have to do is click OK. And that's my list, and simply call this attendance. Okay. And finally, classes. There's one weird way of doing it. Okay. And this is using the home ribbon in the styles group where you see format as table, right? You see this? And you could say name table. You see that? I would just select a style, and there you go. It will allow you to create a table, and simply click OK. And let's call this table 3 classes. Perfect. Okay. So now let's take a look. Attendance and classes. And let's simply go to the first one, names. Perfect, right? So now we have named all of our table, which is now going to be a lot easier to use it in our data model in creating a pivot table, using multiple table in creating a pivot table. So again, in our name tab, select a cell in the table. I am here within the table, and I will go to insert, which is the first step in creating a pivot table. Under tables, I would simply click on pivot table. And I have now take a look, but because this range is called names table, you now see the name of the table, not the range, just like what we have seen earlier. Okay, so now we're going to create a pivot table in another worksheet, but this time, since I'm dealing with multiple worksheet, I will add this data to the data model. Make sure you put a check mark on this, okay? And simply click OK and give it a few seconds. And there you go. In the pivot table field task pane, you now take a look on the list on the right side. You now see right here an active. The person that we were in was the names, but there is what you call all. And if you expand, you could see all of the fields in each table that we are actually using. Nice and clear, correct? Now, these are separated tables. We have to set the relationship between the tables. A relationship must be established with an existing data model to be able to incorporate fields into the pivot table. Okay, to create a relationship, one of the tables must have the column of unique and not repeated values. So to do that, let me demonstrate to you how to build that relationship. I will simply go to the data ribbon. And in my data ribbon, under the data tools, there is an option for relationship. Right now, the manage relationship doesn't have any list of related fields in there. There's no relationship. In the manage relationship dialog box, if you look on the right, there is an option for new. So let's create a relationship between name and attendance table, between name and attendance table. So let me click on the drop down arrow, data model names, and in the attendance between names and attendance, right? The common field I see is employee ID. So I will select employee ID. So attendance, there you go. And there's employee ID. That's a common field. Click OK. So that's my first. Next, let's build another relationship between attendance and classes. And what's common between them is also the class ID. So I will select attendance, table attendance, and the field class ID with classes table and field class ID. And click OK. So far, so good. So we have two relationship created, right? So now we simply click on close. Now let's structure our pivot table to answer the same question: how many employees are attending the training? So we have our list: attendance, classes, and names. So the question is how many employees, right? So in the attendance, just like what we did a while ago, I could use now, you see the data entry to the value, and there's the sum. Okay, so I'm going, because I wanted to know how many, so I'm going to do a count. So on the value field setting, replace the sum with count. Okay, and simply click OK. So there's 4,923. Okay, so far so good. Next. So we wanted to know, remember the question is how many employees attended training? So the trainings are the class names. So I'm going to look for the class name. The class name is under the classes table. Okay, and I'm going to bring it over to the row. So that will break down the number of attendees per class. Okay. Now, to be more detailed, if you wanted to know who are the people who attended the class, you could actually take a look, and you could actually, under the names, I could use employee ID or even email to see those who have attended. So I could even drag the email underneath the class name. So that will show the names of the different people who attended the class. Okay, so you could actually expand and make it more detailed. So far, so good, right? So let me save the changes in here, and that's how you create a pivot table using multiple table. Now, I have enough time to show you the last option is when you have data that is stored outside of Excel, just like a data created in Access. So allow me to show you. Okay, give me a minute. I'm just going to open Access just to be able to show it to you. Okay, there you go. I have Access, and I'm just going to open and browse. And in my document, I have pivot table data fields. I have attendance. It's called attendance in Access. If I open just to show you what it contains, this database contains three tables: attendance, okay, similar to what we have in Excel, classes, and table names. There you go. Okay, so let me just close this. This is just going to be the source, right? So what I'm going to do now is we're going to show you now how do we do that. So we are going to create what we need to do. So allow me to just close this. Let me press Control W to close this and simply open again. I will also save this and close this. So now I just simply have a blank Excel. Okay. So in an empty worksheet, just click your mouse anywhere within an empty worksheet. Now again, go to the insert, right? In your pivot table, click on the drop down arrow, because now we're going to extract the data coming from an external data source. Okay, so I will click from external data source. Now I have the pivot table from an external data source, right? And in here, use an external data source, choose the connection is what you have to do first. So I will click on this link to choose the connection and browse for more to look for my connection, to look for my data. So I click from browse for more and allow me to locate the data. So again, it is in pivot table part 1 data, and there's the attendance. That's the Access database. After selecting it, simply click on open, and there you go. Now I have Take a look at this. I have now here, right? Enable selection of multiple tables. I would like to utilize all of them. So I would just enable selection by clicking a check mark on it. I now see a checkbox corresponding to every table that will allow me to select the table I would like to use. But if I would like to select all of them, I could simply click on names and it will select all of them and simply click on OK. Now that you have it here, choose where you want your pivot table to be placed, an existing worksheet. This is an empty one. Simply click on OK. And there you go. And take a look on the right side. You now have your fields. Now you have to check this, not because it is coming from Access Database, it would automatically have our relationship. So let's take a look at the relationship. Once again, I don't see any relationship, but you could build the relationship that I have shown you earlier, right? Do you remember? We could, because this is basically the same type. So we could actually create a new relationship in here, just as a little review for each one of you. So I would select, oh, you know what? Instead of me doing this, I could probably ask a volunteer as a practice on how to build a relationship on this. Do I have any volunteer? What you could do is you could put your name in the Q&A so I could see you volunteering for this. I will give you access and then I will show you how to do it. And, I will guide you through it, but I want you to try it. Anybody would like to give it a try? Okay. You could type your name in the Q&A so I could see you. Any volunteer, I could give you access. Hey, I see. Okay. Are you, and how, now, correct me if I'm wrong. Am I correct? Enoila Badero. Okay. Allow me to give you access. Okay. I will give you the control. Okay. So I will pass the mouse control to you. And let me look for your name. Okay. I will allow you, Enoila. Okay, I gave you control. Move my mouse. Go ahead, move your mouse. There you go. Okay, let's build a relationship here. So we wanted to make names. So select the first table, names. Click on the drop-down arrow under the names. Go ahead. Right there. You see it on the create relationship. No, right there. On the create relationship dialog box, you see the drop down arrow under the first table. Yeah, very perfect. Select the table names. The table names. Perfect. And then for the column, select employee ID. Click on the drop down. Perfect. Oops. Employee ID. Select employee ID. Perfect. On the related table, click on the drop down arrow and select attendance. Perfect. And notice how employee ID automatically becomes selected. Now click OK. Perfect. Now let's create another one. Click on New. Perfect. Okay, the next relationship is between attendance. Click on the drop-down arrow, attendance, table attendance, yes. And let's use the field class ID. Click on the drop-down arrow, class ID. Perfect. Look for class ID. And related table is classes. And there you go. You have class ID. Click on OK. And simply close. Now, let's follow the same pivot table we created earlier. How many employees attended training? So you could see now that you have under your attendance table, right? Select and drag data entry and put it in the value all the way down. Perfect. Now, right now it says sum of the data entry, correct? Click on the drop down arrow next to it. No, drop. Yeah, perfect. Now select value field settings. There you go. And replace it with count. Yes. And click OK. Perfect. 4,923. So we have the correct count. Now let us drag and select the class name and put it in the row area. Class name is under classes. Okay, and drag it to the row area. Perfect. Okay, there you go. And you could even add names or employee ID under the class name to identify who have taken those classes. Go ahead. You could put it under class name. Yes, there you go. And that will reveal the employee ID number of the people who attended Access 2003 Level 1 classes. Very good. Very good. You did it so well. Hey, congratulations and thank you for participating, Inaya. Okay, let me now take the control. Okay, and we're almost done with the class. So, oops, sorry. Okay, I'm just going to take back the control. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel and okay, there you go. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating. So that's basically how to create. Now, before we go, I did not show you first how to create recommended pivot table. Okay, so let me go back again based on the list. So let me just open another let me reopen. Okay, let me reopen the exercise file for pivot table. Okay, okay, and allow me to remove this again. Okay, I'm deleting this, delete, and I am going to control N, and I'm going to remove this and delete. Okay, and control home. And once again, I'm just reviewing you that to make sure, how do we make sure that we don't have any empty. We go to find and we go to special, remove all the blanks, click OK. Okay, and once I have the blanks, I put N/A, control enter. That should populate everything. Now, I will now have to show you how to use the recommended pivot table. So what do we do? You simply go to insert. You see there's a recommended pivot table option. You click on this one and you notice these are the recommended pivot table. You see, these are like sum of hours by employee status, sum of hours by pay business unit. This is now the sum of hours by the union. This is the count of employee ID, sum of hours, and sum of costs. This is the count by employee status. And this is the count of employee ID by the pay business unit. This is the closest that we have based on what we have created a while ago, remember? Or you could also use this by the union, bargaining unit. This is it. Sum of the costs and sum of the cost by employees. So I guess the count of employee ID by business unit is the closest. So if I select this, I simply click OK on it. This is how close we could actually have. You see that? It is similar and very close. And that's how you use your recommended pivot table. And then you could just modify it according to how you would like it to be. I see some question in the Q&A. Where can we find the recording of this training again? Is it possible to change the text? Yes, we could actually change it. So in here where you have the row data labels right there, right? So you could call it, yes, business unit. Okay? So you could actually do that. See how I was able to replace it in the count in here. You could actually do it simpler on the value setting. You could just say the count, okay, of which is exactly, or the number of employee. You could call it number of, um, let's say completer. Okay, so you could actually do that. Okay, so that's basically how you could actually do it. Okay, so that's basically how you do it. Now, can you would like to find out where the recording is? Okay, so I am just going to share with you. Give me a minute. I'm going to share with you where you could actually find our recordings. Okay, so once the recording after this class, I will have to you request for some branding and editing. You could find the recording in our MTA University. This is the location, and these are the list of the previously delivered training. So you could actually access all of this, including the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation that I have shared with you. Allow me to continue sharing this with you. Contains not only this information, which I'm going to share with you, but some references. These are Microsoft references that I could share with all of you. I could email this deck to all of you who attended this class. Give me until tomorrow to do it because WebEx will give me the final list of attendees for this session by tomorrow. Okay, and you will be receiving this. Um, oh, you want me to elaborate a little on the difference between collapse and filter. When you're collapsing, you're just hiding. Let me just go back, okay? So let me minimize this. Let me go back here to our pivot table right there. You see where you have in here, I have here, you see, this is, okay, if I click here, this is, the expand, the active fields. I could expand, I had collapse. When you see the minus sign here, it will actually collapse it. See, it will hide the details underneath it. When you are filtering, that is this segment or section on your pivot table fields, right? You see that on the right side where you have filtering. For those of you who did filtering before, some of you have been doing filtering in the past, right? Have you done filtering in Excel? It's the same concept of the regular filtering in Excel. When you are filtering, they are actually, you are doing like a more of building a criteria, filtering it or hiding information based on the criteria that you have. That is actually filtering. So you're hiding information that you will not see in here. In here, it's not actually hidden, it's just temporarily collapsed. It's just still there. You're just collapsing it. In when you are filtering, so if I have class names in here, okay, you notice this will all be employee ID. Now in here, when I filter, if I have all the classes, I click on all and I select all multiple items and remove all. If I just wanted to see access level 1 as a filtering, I click OK. This is all what I have. It doesn't show any other classes. This is just for access 2003, and that's filtering. The other one, you are just expanding and collapsing. Okay, that's the difference. Um, okay, I don't use Excel idea. And thank you once again. Good afternoon, and thank you. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Goodbye.